All right. Are we all ready to go there, Curtis?
Yes, we are.
Okay. I call to order the January meeting of the Zoning Board of Appeals for the City of Easthampton. Today is Wednesday, January 27th. Because this is a remote meeting, all people are on Zoom. And as a result, we are following the guidelines as set forth by the City Council and the Mayor and the State of Massachusetts. So initially, we have some administrative items we need to resolve. The approval of the minutes from the December 16th, 2020 meeting. Can I get a motion?
Motion to approve the minutes.
All right, Anthony is the motion.
I have two corrections.
Okay.
Before we approve the minutes.
Yes.
On the page with Chris Rogers, application number 2, the 4th bullet point.
Pulling up Chris Rogers. I'm right here. Okay, great.
The 4th bullet point.
Yep.
It says the site is being used as a billiards hall. It should say they want to use the site as a billiards hall. It isn't today.
Okay.
Right?
Yep.
And I think and also the application on Strong Street, there was something the applicant said that I think should be added to the minutes.
Okay.
And he said something, I can't remember the exact wording, but that he thought the property was zoned commercial residential. And you might want to look at the tape or whatever. Mm-hmm. But I think that's an important point to make.
So two remarks. Minutes. Change to future or subjunctive tense for billiards hall. To tense. And add comment regarding zoning under 63 Strong Street. Will do.
Thank you.
Okay. So with that said, can I get a second?
Second.
Okay, there we go. We have a second. All right, roll call vote. Tony?
Yes.
Steve?
Yes.
Linda?
Yes.
Lindsay?
Yes.
And myself, yes. And I believe that's all we are these days, aren't we? Did I forget anyone, Curtis?
Nope.
Okay.
Perfect.
All right. Now, hold on, because let's bring that up. I can see it here. Okay. So correspondence requests for comment from other boards or committees, officials, anything like that, Curtis?
None save for those in regard to our projects on the agenda tonight.
Okay, Ed, is there anyone who's interested in public speak? This is an opportunity to speak to the board regarding anything that is not currently on our agenda for this evening. And I wouldn't even know how somebody could let you know. But we'll give them the opportunity anyway. Okay. So with that said, we will continue our hearing from December 16th, 2020, by which Chris Rogers is seeking a special permit under section 12.7 of the Easthampton zoning ordinance to operate a commercial establishment with use, retail, and service. Number 10, restaurant, bar, and number 40, indoor recreation with the property. The property is located at 105 Pleasant Street in the Neighborhood Business Zoning District. All right. Is Mr. Rogers or his representative here to speak?
Yeah, Jeff Squire from the Berkshire Design Group is here. I don't know whether, Chris, you want to say anything, but I've got a quick presentation to provide if folks are willing. Unless, Chris, you want to say anything?
Sorry, I was on mute. I'm here. I'm present.
Okay.
Okay.
Yeah.
So, Chris, I don't know whether there's anything you want to add, but in general, we've, I guess we've taken all the board's comments and concerns and considerations into the site plan. I think one of the key things to point is that Chris, correct me if I'm wrong, but you now own the property, so this isn't a situation where it's contingent on getting a permit. You own the property, so we our goal is to really try to find a way to make this a viable project, and we hear everybody's concerns. So that said, we looked at the various options, what we can legitimately do with abutting properties in terms of parking agreements, and then what the site is realistically and realistically capable of holding. And so we submitted a plan that both reduces the building footprint slightly, adjusts things a little bit on the site, expands the parking lot enough to satisfy zoning and all those requirements. I think the one thing to note is we were able to fit, well, I don't know, are you able to share the screen, Curtis, or should I share?
Whichever you'd prefer. I've made you co-host and I stopped sharing so that you could, but
Okay.
ultimately I've already pulled it up as well. So if it's easier for me to do, I can do it.
Great. If you don't mind me sharing, I will do that and just run through this real quick. So hopefully everybody can see this. So just again, the site we're pretty constrained to this front. Really 1/3 of the site. All of this is presently developed. One of the things to note that may come up in further discussions is just that, the site presently underneath all the brush and debris that's there now really is paved up to the property line, which is, if you can see my cursor and where the hand is now, all of that area beneath there and everything, in the upper portion of the site is currently paved as part of, what used to be there as the former service station. This is just, again, revisiting what we had looked at previously. This was a 3,200 square foot building. We had 17 spaces, understanding the concerns that the board raised. And so what we've done is we've looked at reducing both the building footprint and increasing the number of parking spaces on the, site that we really have available for development. And I guess what we're at a stage where we recognize that there's a little bit of re-engineering to do with respect to the stormwater and some of Conservation Commission concerns and with respect to both resource areas and the stormwater permit. But this scheme isn't drastically dissimilar from what we have looked at and engineered for previously. So this is a reduction in building footprint, a slight increase in a parking lot area. Those two numbers come out about even. So we're very confident that we can make minor modifications in the stormwater system to accommodate this scheme. What we're looking for at this juncture is really the board's approval or comments on this scheme before we launch into full amendments with the Conservation Commission, because we already do have an approved permit with them. So hopefully that. So this is a 2,800 square foot building. I understand it requires 20 spaces under the amusement use. We've relocated the dumpsters to this side of the site so that one of the things that Curtis, again, I'd realized that I had a dumpster space back here that only gave us 19 spaces, so we needed one additional space. So the only way to get that was to relocate a dumpster over here, but it still provides access in. It's screened. All of the other provisions for the parking area are satisfied, with the exception that these are 9 foot by 18 foot spaces. as it is because of the grade difference in the back. I don't know if you can see, but back in this corner, particularly where the grade drops off, this corner necessitates, this entire side of the parking lot will necessitate a retaining wall, which is certainly feasible. This corner right here, right now is proposed at about 10 feet high. So if you can imagine taking these spaces from 18 feet to 20 feet in length increases this overall, distance of parking lot by 6 feet, which pushes this to about an 18-foot tall wall, which again, just construction-wise, cost-wise is considerable in magnitude of the whole project. So, one of the things that we've noted in the application or the letter is that we've been able to satisfy the 18 or the 19 spaces plus one handicap spaces, but we do need a little bit of relief on the depth of the parking spaces just because of the site constraints. I think all other aspects of the, we looked at, room for bike racks, the rain garden. I think all of those components, those elements would still all be retained in this scheme, slightly smaller, slightly revised, but before we launch into, full engineering and revisions with the Conservation Commission and stormwater permit, we just wanted to, gather your comments and sentiments on this scheme. So I will leave it at that. Okay.
Question for you is, obviously you're looking for a reduction in the size of the space length.
Correct.
The space width, is that still as required?
Yes, it is.
And is the distance where you have two vehicles abutting back to back, is that still meet the good practice, general requirements of a parking location?
Yes, it does. So you're talking about the drive aisle between this parking stalls is still 24 feet. We've got 60 feet between the parking aisles, which is certainly an industry standard. And
okay.
Yes.
You're right.
Did you say the width was still 10 feet?
The width is 9 feet.
Okay, because you implied it was still 10. It was 10.
I'm sorry. No.
And obviously a reduction to 2,800 square feet is going to reduce the interior. Has there been any thought process as to what the interior of the structure is going to look like? Are you going to still try to maintain the 10 tables as was previously proposed?
Chris could probably better answer this question. I think we would certainly expect a reduction in the overall footprint interior. It may be, Chris, I probably shouldn't speak, ahead of myself, but it probably a reduction in tables, square footage somehow to accommodate that space, but we're still going to need to satisfy code requirements in terms of restrooms, accessibility, all of those things.
Yeah.
I believe we can still fit the 10 tables at this point.
Okay.
All right. I mean, obviously you need to do it to be financially viable. So I can understand your concern.
Yep.
Okay. That's that. Obviously there's going to be some requirements for, are you going to be within the rear yard setback or the wetland setback to be able to do that construction that you need to do?
So there's a little bit of a change in work in the buffer zone. The change in that work is part of what I was referring to before, that we'd have to go back to the Conservation Commission for approval for an amendment to the existing permit, but that scope of work isn't substantially different from what has already been permitted. So I'm confident that we shouldn't have any issues given the previous development on the site for the proposed changes.
Okay. And all right, and so the structure is, basically you are right up to the front and side yard setback with the structure, and you've shifted it to be able to accommodate the additional spaces. Okay.
Correct.
Okay. Are there any other board members that have questions to Mr. Squire?
Yes. I agree with you that 9 by 18 is an adequate parking space, but the zoning regulations require 10 by 20, and I don't believe the Zoning Board of Appeals has the authority to waive a zoning requirement. We can grant variances, but we can't grant waivers for parking lot size.
One
And
comment
also,
I'll offer.
I think the regulations, don't they require the first 15 feet to be landscaped in this zone? And you have it paved, and I know it was paved years ago when it was a gas station, but the gas station is long gone. And so basically the property's been abandoned. And so you have to comply with today's rules. That's my opinion.
I can provide commentary to both of those because those sounded like questions regarding ordinance at the pleasure of the board. John, is that okay with you?
Please.
Okay, so the first is that the parking standards under off-street parking standards, so 10.1, are 9 feet by 20 feet. So that the spaces as depicted are sufficient width, but not sufficient depth. The standards in the highway business zone, they include language under 10.522, which call for a landscaped buffer strip established adjacent to any public road to visually separate uses from the road. The applicant does currently have the rain garden depicted. And Jeff, you can feel free to reshare. The board can make a determination if they find it meets that standard or not.
I was talking about the area of the parking lot.
Right in here.
Yeah.
Correct.
Yeah.
I think the regulation requires landscape along the entire frontage. Unless there's something unique about the property. And I don't consider anything unique about the property. Just doesn't seem to me to fit this particular use.
I mean, I guess I would argue that the unique thing about this property, at least in my experience, is that the rear, 2/3 to half to 2/3 is undevelopable because of topographical, issues.
But the applicant knew that when they bought it.
Sure.
It wasn't like that was unknown.
The area that you have depicted, Jeff, where the apron from the parking area to the street, that swath right there, is that sidewalk? Is that what's going on in that area?
So this line, if you can see it, just below, right where my hand is, just below the heavy line is the extent of the sidewalk. The heavy line just above it, where my cursor is now, is the property line.
So there's going to be very little barrier between the sidewalk and the parking area?
Right. Right. And so, as, again, understanding, the sort of the nuances of the zoning, we were trying to provide, a site plan which put all the parking as defined by the zoning, beyond the front setback, but that the vehicle circulation lanes, around it would be allowed within the front setback, just as, most of the commercial properties up and down, Pleasant Street.
Yeah, the parking lot immediately to the left of that I believe belongs to Eastwork.
Right.
Is right, the road and the parking. There's no buffer there at all.
Right.
So it's going to be very similar to what is directly across the street.
Right. Right. I mean, there is no buffer. I mean, this is a recent photo. You can look at what's here.
Right. And there's a high curb basically stopping cars. And in that situation, there are cars that are parked directly against it. And you're proposing to have cars that are actually parking away from it?
Correct.
And do you feel that those spots that creates a safer walking environment along that sidewalk, rather than having cars backing up towards the sidewalk, rather than having cars parking towards the sidewalk?
So yeah, good question. So I think what's nice about this is that still retains the separation between vehicles and pedestrians, which is, I guess really one of the objectives or the goals in a neighborhood business district is recognizing those potential conflicts, that this still retains a dedicated, sidewalk along Pleasant Street. It retains a dedicated connection back into the site with a sidewalk for pedestrians, but then the vehicles all have, which you can see shaded in gray, they have their own dedicated area, which would be separated by curbs and well defined, so that those two conflicts wouldn't be an issue.
And will there be a high curb similar to what is across the street? Or is that asphalt going to be approximately at the same elevation as the sidewalk?
So it's proposed as a 6-inch curb, which is pretty standard for what's in the surrounding area. It's a 6-inch vertical curb.
Okay, so a 6-inch vertical curb, then back down to the same elevation, sidewalk to asphalt. So yep. there is some sort of a buffer or a barricade per se that will stop cars from exiting or extending themselves onto the sidewalk.
Exactly. Everything that you see in white here, I guess where around my cursor is now, would be a raised 6-inch, sidewalk or landscape area.
Okay.
Right. Yeah, all of this.
Okay. All right. Does any other member of the board have any questions for Mr. Squire?
Well, how about sometimes you see like those 2-foot wooden fencing bumper guards in parking lots for situations like that. I'd almost feel a little more comfortable, I think, if there was something like that as a divider between the parking lot and the sidewalk. I know you have the 6-inch curb, but that to me is still close to the sidewalk.
Sure. No, there's certainly room to accommodate. A guardrail is what you're referring to as one of the timber guardrails. We could certainly accommodate that. Yeah.
Yep. Okay. Lindsay, do you have any questions, thoughts? Okay. And
she's on mute.
I think Lindsay is muted.
She's on mute. Yeah.
Sorry. I was just saying, that this is a complex project, and I think that different parts of it play into, different, like whether we can approve the parking spaces, if we can't, plays into the setback, and there's just so many interplaying pieces here that I don't know. Maybe we need to. I guess we'll go through all this thing, all the ordinances and step by step at some point to see if everything meets the requirements. But I just see a lot of potential issues in different aspects of the project.
okay. So, Curtis, do you have any additional commentary other than what you've put in the notes there?
I guess I'll just repeat some of what I said in those notes. One of the major contentions is that the original project contained spaces that were in the front setback and a smaller number of spaces for an overall larger amusement facility use. At the board's last discussion in December, the board determined that the applicant could utilize the space calculus for indoor amusement to determine how many spaces would be required on site. So one space per 150 square feet of internal area. That in turn would mean that this smaller footprint requires a total of these 20 spaces that you see here. There are now no parking spaces in the front setback. But there is which is impossible under both the general zoning ordinances and specifically under the highway business development standards. And the last thing I wanted to say for the record is that the project has received an order of conditions from the Conservation Commission on December 14th, 2020, which is the approval that Jeff Squire is referring to potentially needing to amend. The order of conditions is based on the original plan as it was viewed by the ZBA, and as such, an amendment to change the footprint will require an amendment from the Conservation Commission. I spoke with the agent of the Conservation Commission, and she was saying, hypothetically, as long as there's not a substantial change within the work area, you know, we would take it as it comes. It's a fairly straightforward process to amend, unless there's greater work in the buffer area.
Right.
I need clarification, Curtis.
Sure.
You said that parking wasn't allowed in the front setback. So you say that the driveways accessory to the parking spaces are legal?
Yes.
There's nothing in the zoning ordinance that I could find, and I Jamie, if I'm wrong, feel free to correct me on this.
No, you are correct, and the reason is every driveway has to go through a setback. There's just no way to cross over from the public right of way into the interior of a lot without going through that setback. So the driveways are allowed in setbacks, whereas the parking spaces.
Under 10.1 and 10.5, both parking spaces are disallowed in front setbacks rather.
But the driveway is okay. And I did want to point out, Curtis, you said highway business. Did you mean neighborhood business?
I did. Same ordinance applies. Oh, so close.
Oh, go ahead, Linda.
So now the only thing that this does not comply with is the 20-foot versus 18-foot length of the parking space.
If you're are you asking my opinion on that matter?
Yes.
That's what I see as the explicit waiver being requested by the applicant.
But we don't have the authority to grant waivers.
I would say two things in response to that. The first is that the board can make determinations regarding approvals of projects over a commentary regarding strict compliance with the ordinance, and furthermore that the applicant could apply for a variance if the board was potentially receptive to that application.
See, I disagree with your first characterization. I don't think we have the authority to grant a waiver.
Yeah.
And there's no point in a regulation. If we don't like it, we just waive it.
Right. What I'm saying is that I think that that's a philosophically sound statement, the one that you're making. You could also reject that statement and say we can approve no matter what, and the authority of the board is ultimately binding on that matter.
I would say that the board does have authority to grant waivers for the space under the Commercial Development Performance Standard, Section 10.5. We talked about this at the first hearing for developments that make a long-term commitment to reducing traffic, have a traffic impact study and propose alternative methods. The board is allowed to reduce the parking requirements up to 20%. And so if you look at that 20% number, if the board feels that there's some long-term commitment in reduction of trip reductions, I think you could use that 20% to reduce the size of the parking space and or the number of parking spaces.
Yeah, minimum parking standards may be reduced by a percentage up to a maximum of 20%, which could be the size of the stalls or the number of parking spaces applied.
It doesn't say the size of the stalls. It just says the number of parking spaces.
No, it says neither. It says minimum. It just says parking standards.
The minimum parking standards.
So if I'm understanding this correctly, there's no restriction to having a driveway in the front yard setback.
Yeah, and I agree with Jamie's logic there.
Yeah. And in the same breath, we're also saying that we can reduce the requirement should we deem every effort is made and that it's not going to, there's going to be no overall detriment to the balance of the zoning district and things along those lines.
Well, they would have to submit a trip reduction plan that the board finds adequate, that makes a long-term commitment to reducing the amount of trips in order to trigger that reduction 20%, up to 20%. And it's not necessarily 20%, it's the board decides up to whatever, up to 20%. Alternatively, the applicant could make an application for a variance to the size of those spaces based off the topographical concerns that Jeff Squire mentioned in his presentation.
The justification to develop the property, and I'm going to kind of go off on a little bit of a tangent and just kind of bear with me. I hope it makes sense. If we look that the property is currently a vacant lot that is has asphalt all over it, a portion of it. The percentage of the lot that is looking to be used is relatively small compared to what's going to remain as green space, for lack of a better term. Am I correct in that statement?
You are. Yeah. No, absolutely.
And so to say, well, we're going to develop too much or anything like that. I mean, obviously there's going to have to be a stormwater prevention plan, and you're going to have to figure out how to get that water off the parking lot, and whether it's going to go into the existing, storm drains of Pleasant Street in the city, or I don't know if you even have room for a retention basin in there based on the topography.
Yeah. Yeah, no, I mean, as I said before, we've got an entire stormwater system that was designed for the original project. And so the shift in balance of impervious area from the parking lot to the building or vice versa, we've got that impervious area roughly is equal. And so we're able to accommodate that pretty easily.
Okay. That's
all a private system. So we're able to, satisfy all the other standards. I think, one of the things I'd note just because I've got the table at the moment is that in regards to the trip reduction system, I'd like to, point out that one of the reasons this site is so attractive to Chris and to this project is because it is located, we are providing bike racks, but it's closely located within the proximity of the bike path to all the activity across the street at Eastworks and those buildings. The bus stop is immediately across the street. So part of the strategy, we'd love to have a carpool plan, but the reality of it is that, part of the strategy of this was that this is located in a site that takes advantage of all those public transportation opportunities that we possibly can. And so that was part of the argument for trying to reduce the number of spaces initially in the site plan that we looked at. And, we've been able to provide everything that we can on the site now, plus one space. I think 19 are required just by virtue of the geometry. We're able to provide an additional one, but, all these other components play into that consideration. So I just hope that doesn't get overlooked.
Okay. Okay, does any member of the board have anything further they'd like to ask or comment upon?
No, well, I look at it, and I wish there was a picture of it, and look at the adjacent lot, like I say, if you're facing it to the left-hand side of that, which I believe belongs to Eastworks. And
correct.
Why couldn't Eastworks buy this property and do the same thing there, continuing his straight parking right off the street all the way across there? This is a much, much better situation. I think that all the issues we've had before, to me, have been addressed, and this would certainly be a vast improvement to what's there. That's it.
Okay. All right.
Ed,
one of the advantages of working from home is you can, or having these meetings remotely, you can pull up Google Maps and look and see what the view actually is across the street. And that's how I knew that there was in front of Eastworks, there is a curb, and the cars do abut, pull right in against that parking lot or against the sidewalk. It does, there are some advantages to this remote thing. Okay. And with that said, does Chris or Jeff, do you have any more you'd like to add before I open it up to the public?
Knowing that we're going to open up to the public, one thing I heard Jeff ask in his initial request was to get a sense of what the board was feeling on this particular proposal. Because it strikes me that the applicant is going to go before the Conservation Commission and complete more detailed versions of these same plans if the board gives them a sense that these plans work better with their expectations. I know that there are...
Is the applicant, are Jeff and Chris looking for an actual ruling this evening, or are they looking for a temperature of where the board's going and whether they should continue down the path? That was kind of my question. What are you looking for from us? Are you looking for us to grant you what you feel you need, or are you looking to say, okay, yeah, you're headed in the right direction? I mean, you've moved the goalpost significantly. I will give you that much. Yeah. And have you moved it far enough to continue the engineering and everything that is going to be required to make sure the plan actually does work?
Right. So, I don't know whether, Curtis, you want to add anything, but I guess ideally, best case scenario is we would get the board's approval tonight on this site plan with the condition that we obtain, all the appropriate approvals from the Conservation Commission, as was discussed earlier. I'm confident, that based on, what I said earlier about the impervious areas and the design of the stormwater system and the overall impacts of the site, that we can make a minor adjustment in the system to satisfy everything that we need to satisfy, and that we're not going to end up with a drastically different, stormwater system or engineering system for the site than what we've already had approved. So I suspect it will be a fairly minor amendment with the Conservation Commission. But again, that's from my position. I can't speak for the board and your comfort level with that. So I think, from Chris's standpoint, the applicant's standpoint, I would say that the more confidence we have from the various boards and jurisdictional authorities in town that allow the projects to advance, the better. If the board is uncomfortable and wants all those approvals prior to your approval, then I think we would certainly entertain that. But again, the Conservation Commission is really going to be more concerned about the stormwater system and its ability to function properly, rather than parking space widths and dimensions. So again, that's what I would. Ideally, we would get approval from you tonight. The plan as we've presented is at least on a real survey plan. The dimensions are real, so we know that it's a feasible plan. There's some engineering costs that are going to be associated with it that I think, and speaking for Chris, I think he would like to have some confidence knowing that, we would get approval or have approval to be able to do those additional costs and advance that work. But again, I can't speak for the board. So.
Okay. All right. I think I know. I get a sense of what you're looking for there, Jeff. Okay. Curtis, question for you, sir.
Okay.
Not sure where you go. I get you back.
I'm still here.
Oh, there you are. Okay.
Yeah. Okay. Go on.
We could look to make a move this forward, you do have something in your commentary notes there, considering the substantial change to the proposed building, but that's not as much our concern or anything like that, as long as there's no other items in there that require any sort of zoning review when it comes time to their submittal. Am I correct in that statement? Is that making sense?
I don't want to categorically say that you're right or wrong on it. What I'll say is that's a statement that you can make. I know that's the most Weasley statement I could possibly make, but it is also a fair one, because what you're asking me is whether a depiction of the interior of the structure is relevant for me as board chair to speak about. And it's not my place as staff to say yes or no in response to that. If you want to say, as board chair, I'm satisfied by not having an interior breakdown of spaces, of interior square footages, dimensions, subdivision of space, site lighting, details for light fixtures, signage locations, all that jazz. That's completely your right, and I as staff am completely non-judgmental of it.
Right.
I further think that the amended plans, as I've said just a moment ago, make great strides to bring the site into further compliance on the basis of the board's previous commentary.
Yeah. So
easily answer. Okay.
I know. No, I appreciate what you're saying, because it leaves the board with a whole lot of exposure if we go ahead and stamp it, because we don't know a lot of those other details, and we want to make sure that it is, that there aren't any other concerns that could arise once we say yes.
A hypothetical best case, in the interest of giving a good answer, a hypothetical best case scenario is, the worst case scenario in one direction is the board continues, and then Jeff and Chris come back in a month with a plan that is completely identical and just has some more pieces of information that don't change anyone's opinions on anything, because they're largely irrelevant to the major questions that I believe the applicant has made great strides on. So that's option one. We continue and they provide them no information that would ultimately be relevant to your decision making. The worst case scenario on the opposite side is that the applicant, in drawing out some internal division that has as yet not been depicted to us, or maybe not even envisioned by the applicant, would force a change in the way in which the site is conveyed. That would somehow change from the plan that we viewed this evening to the plan as it would be put into the ground and be recorded with the plan. Recorded with the decision of the board.
Well, and
the last thing I'll say on that score is that either way, the applicant is going to need to bring a scalable plan forward to the Conservation Commission.
So the applicant needs to bring a scalable plan to the Conservation Commission. The something I'm looking at is that if there's not a true plan for the interior of the structure and how it's going to be laid out and everything like that, and we are going under the auspice that it is being used as a entertainment facility for the fact that it is or amusement facility for the fact that it is a pool hall, but we don't really know how many pool tables are going to be in it versus how many bar stools are going to be in it. I think because that dictates the number of parking spots and everything along the lines. Not that I think that the applicant is going to hoodwink us and all of a sudden change what they want to do, but I also don't want to give an approval before it's time, because we're going to make a decision. We would today make a decision based on the fact that it is, we're going to make it a pool hall, but we really don't know how many tables we're going to have. And we really don't know how we're going to lay out the interior. So there's still a lot of vague in there in my book. Well, but I really like where you're going.
Do we have any kind of authority about what is inside the building?
Well,
Tony, why is he here to begin with?
So can I speak to that? Generally speaking, the board is looking at the use from the walls out. What generally speaking happens inside the walls is not the purview of the board. It's the purview of the building code and the building commissioner. But I do think it is, relevant, as you've said, about the number of tables or bar stools or things like that, but not necessarily the layout of the walls or where the windows, which way the
So Jamie, with that in mind, both uses are permissible within the zone. The difference in the uses is what dictates what happens outside of the building envelope. So does it not then say that we should know what the use is so we know how to regulate the zone on the outside of the building?
And for this, I want to just jump in. Where I'm deriving that the board has a right to ask for this question is under specific standard special permit application, section 12.7.5.1, letter O. For new buildings, uses, or projects, a table containing the following information must be included. A, areas of buildings to be used for particular uses such as retail operation, office, storage, etc. B, maximum number of employees. C, maximum seating capacity where applicable. Or D, number of parking spaces existing and required for the intended use. This table was provided with the original plan.
Right, and you're correct that the board can request it and can look at that and it figures into the decision making.
Yeah.
But the board can't. It's sort of where the board can have reasonable requests for conditioning the parking layout or changes to safety, things like that, how someone might navigate from, across the site as a pedestrian or vehicles or things like that. Once you get into the interior, the board, you just sort of like, okay, well, that's what they're presenting.
Right, yeah.
We don't like the way that
the doors swing.
Well, yeah, or where the bar is located, and we want to see it move to the other side of the room.
It's not generally the board's place. I agree. I just want to make clear that that's where I'm like speaking to.
Right, and I would say that for the board, it might be a good way to go about this would be to, if the board feels more or less comfortable, then taking a straw poll after public speak and public comment. We got some letters as well, and then sort of having Curtis draft up a draft decision while the new plans are submitted, and then at the next meeting the board would have a full written decision to review that would outline everything that's been discussed, what the conditions are, and would have the plans attached to it, so that way there's no surprises later. Oh, I thought that the plans were going to have X, Y, and Z, and then they didn't have it, and we at least know. And
Okay. I
draft decision could be reviewed at the next meeting.
Okay. So with that said, we're approaching the 7 o'clock hour. We have 10 minutes, and I kind of, I try to give every applicant 60 minutes. That seems like a reasonable amount of time, and especially when we have other people on the docket for the evening. So I just want to putting that out there. We got 10-minute warning.
Well, I want to make sure we listen to the people. Some of the neighbors want to.
Absolutely. So and that's where I'm going next. So at this point, as long as the applicant has fully vetted what they want to say, we're going to open it up to anyone else that is out there in Never Never Land, as we all are here. Curtis, is there anybody in the zone there?
There are many people present. If anybody wants to speak, feel free to go ahead and raise your hand using the Zoom app, or just unmute yourself. We're a small enough number. You should just be able to unmute yourself if you have any comments. We additionally have 3 letters for the record. John, I'm happy to read them in, or you can read them in, or however we want to do it.
You can read them, because it'll take me longer to find them on my computer than it will you.
Do we need to read them, or can we just note them for the record?
Jamie?
I think it'd be good for everyone who's present to have an opportunity to see those letters. We can also screen share them and give everyone 30 seconds or so to minute to read them.
Because one didn't seem like it was, as one was directly to John, the other was to John and the board.
Right, so then I would do the ones, well, I leave that to John to make that decision. But I would just also want to add about public speak before we open it up, people to say their name and address the comments to the board, not the applicant.
Correct. Yes.
So once we're done with the public speak here, I'll start screen sharing those letters.
Okay. All right. So let's go ahead, and is there anybody out there? I don't see anybody. Oh,
I'm here. I did write a letter, but I'm hoping someone can actually tell me when you determined that the property would only be amusement, that you wouldn't take a bar, restaurant into your calculations, because I think I missed that, and I was at every meeting. So was there a vote that made that determination?
The applicant applied for use under his major use was to use it as a entertainment facility that will have a bar present.
I understand.
Or will serve alcohol. That's.
And did you all make a determination about that, or that's just an allowable thing for you all to review?
Well, this is what we were just discussing, in that both of those are allowable uses within the zone, but that the use dictates, the use inside the building envelope dictates what the zoning is on the property, and that's why they have to commit to what they are saying their use is. And I think that they've come back, and everything they've presented has said that they are using it as for the entertainment purpose, for whatever the exact terminology is there, for a amusement purpose. And as a result, their calculations for parking and things along those lines are all based on that information.
Right, from the draft minutes.
So what I'm not understanding is if there's a usage in the building that clearly dictates that at least half the seating in that space is about one particular business, how does the board determine that between the two uses?
I think that was discussed a little bit at the last meeting. I know that Tony thought that it should just be commercial recreation, or whatever the term is, and the bar was an accessory use. And originally I disagreed with that. But I think I pointed out that if it becomes a quote unquote bar, as opposed to commercial recreation, it's a zoning violation. And they get a cease and desist. I'm sure I mentioned that last meeting.
Yeah. I just think that because the usage is so heavily weighted towards the bar.
It's not weighted towards the bar. If there's 10 pool tables in there, there's going to be very little room for a bar.
I'm talking about, I'm sorry, I'm only talking about how many people could be in the space and seating. And that was the only frame of reference that I was using. I'm trying to understand this project in terms of all of its usage and all of its implications for the parking, and also just I'm in Mill District. It's a different standard than a lot of Pleasant Street, which is neighborhood business, and everyone's looking across the street and going, well, it works because Eastworks is there and that's what it is. But I'm in the Mill District. I'm not, my tenants, the 110 businesses and 300 plus individuals that are in our building daily, plus all the people that visit us, it's a very different thing. And that was determined before I even bought the property. That's the way it was. There were cars literally parked right up to the street. So it's I don't quite understand those kind of choices. But again, I go back to this use of the bar, and I basically I disagree with the board on this, and that's fine. But if this is going forward, then my question is, what if of the 10 tables, all of a sudden a table goes away and there are chairs?
That then becomes a zoning variance, violation.
So if anything about the design changes, it becomes a violation. I'm new to all of this. I'm just trying to understand it, because I see this becoming a bar in 10 years, and some of the same sort of gradualism that I'm hearing in this conversation today is a future board is going to come and say, well, they had half the spaces being that, and it worked, and that all fit in with the neighborhood, and that's all going to be fine. And well, so you hear my issue, John. I'm just looking at something that is starting in one place and is slowly moving in another direction. And I'm already seeing half the seating, and it would be good to see what the new design is, but half the seating is really only about selling liquor. And
okay, so what I can tell you,
very different from a bowling alley and so on.
Right. So, Will, if you look at it on a simple use, the building use, if they are applying as an amusement facility, then the primary use is for a amusement facility. If they decide that they want to, in 10 years, change to a bar, then they are going to have to go back and get a new use permit from the permit granting authority. And at that point, change of use, a good building commissioner is going to say, no, you don't meet the requirements for that use. And as a result, that use is not permitted.
And my only other question is this, because I do have a letter before you all, and you all can look at that and so on. But my other question is, why is the deck not considered a part of the calibrations of the requirements for parking? Curtis, maybe you can clarify that for me.
Yeah, it's an element of how the calculus is for parking area. We derive parking area from the gross square footage of the structure. And we talked about this in the last meeting. In some ways it cuts against the applicant, in some ways it benefits the applicant. So right now it doesn't include the deck outside because that's not considered part of the gross square footage of the structure. It's not a space that's part of the building itself, but the gross square footage that is inclusive towards the calculus of how many minimum parking spaces are required does include kitchens, storage areas, and offices, such should they exist. Further, if it's the contention of the board that the deck, let's imagine like a hypothetical business that's all deck and no building, the board could contend that the minimum parking, there should be more parking spaces put in. The minimum parking spaces is not the number of parking spaces the applicant needs to provide, full stop.
Okay.
And I'm gonna, with your permission, Will and John, I'm gonna actually, I'm gonna find which one of these letters is yours, and then I'm gonna pull it up. Is that all right? Just to pop up on screen.
That's fine. I have it in front of me. If you just, I don't need to read the whole thing. I mean, I'm very appreciative of the process.
Yeah.
I'm concerned because there seem to be some members of the board that think I'm the big guy coming in to be a spoiler, and I think what's lost on people here is that I have 110 businesses. I have 65 residents in my space. I have 70,000 square feet I haven't developed yet. The well-being and the ability of people to grow their businesses within my space. We're a very active and effective incubator. All of these things are why I'm here tonight. I am not here because I'm some big guy kind of squashed little guy. I'm actually representing a lot of little people. And I think that's really, really important to me that the board understands that. And I also think it's really tough for me to look at what's going to happen on Pleasant Street, because I think that what is being decided here is setting precedent for what will be a parking nightmare on the street itself. And that you're kind of establishing patterns that don't make me feel good about how decisions will go forward. I understand the goodwill. I understand the believing in people and their endeavors. And, you know, I know Chris. I actually, you know, had long talks about him being in my building, and I think that I've told him before that I think that a billiard hall in Easthampton would be great. But that is a very challenging site, and that is going to put the burden of the parking on Pleasant Street. And I'm not, and ultimately it's, you know, if those decisions keep multiplying, it's going to put the burden of the parking on the Mill District, and the Mill District really has its work cut out for it. I mean, between the different mills that are being worked on right now, they're you know, maybe between 200 and 300,000 square feet that need parking, and we would die for a ratio that Chris has at this moment. We're not even close, and yet we make it work. I don't have my tenants don't park on Pleasant Street. And I make choices regarding that because I know I have to. And so I'm concerned about what's going to happen to Pleasant Street. I'm going to be concerned about the fact that because it's a drawn line between neighborhood business on the one hand and mill industrial, that the board isn't going to make really clear, decisive decisions that really are about the neighborhood business attributes of the neighborhood. To be across from Eastworks does not mean you're going to be Eastworks. It means you're going to be something different. And I know you're not saying that, but I hear these allusions to, like, well, look where his parking is or whatever. And I feel that the zoning for neighborhood business has very specific goals, and I don't think it's about flooding Pleasant Street with a lot of extra parking. And so that's really, you know, not the exact letter I wrote, but it's where my concerns are.
It's paraphrased pretty well there, Will.
And I don't envy any of you the job you do. I think it's pretty extraordinary that you give of your time to actually think about what all these neighborhoods are like. I'm just in disagreement with this decision tonight.
Well, and Will, to answer part of what you're saying there is the property is in itself a very unique location in that it directly abuts a different zone across the street. And we've run into these situations before where, well, the guy across the street is allowed to do it. How come I can't do it? And sometimes we have to say no. But I think that, you know, if you look at the neighborhood business and the mill district, the mill business or mill industrial business district, they are similar yet different. So I think that, you know, what's being proposed in my mind, I think is if anything, it's going to be beneficial to you and your tenants to be able to walk across the street to be able to do these things. No different than they can walk down the street and play ping pong or things along those lines. You know, down the hall from where they are. So I think it's. But I appreciate what you're saying, and I appreciate I appreciate what you've done for the city, and that, you know, you've been the leader of the band for a long time on what's happening down there, and I appreciate it.
I appreciate that, John. I'm just really I can bore the universe with discussions of sewage and parking. Those are my forte. And I think a lot about I see a place across the street that can easily, easily house 100 to 150 people if you take into the fact that the deck is designed to have standing room, and it's a wonderful design with those wonderful garage doors to go up so that there's a whole milling around and everything else. It's going to be really busy, and that is going to put undue pressure on the businesses around. Probably, James Whitmer can speak for himself, but we might just start a towing company because we're going to have real issues. But I think it's what's the next business? What's the next vision that you have in terms of neighborhood business that comes in where someone can have 20 parking spaces, but they can house 100 to 150 people at any given time in their space and not be breaking the rules? I have a question about the strength of that decision, and I think it has bad implications for Pleasant Street.
Okay.
So I'm done. I can just keep going, so I'll mute myself and spare you. And thank you again for listening.
Yeah. Thank you all. Okay. Is there somebody else? Curtis, is there anybody else out there?
I don't see any other raised hands. I still do have 2 letters from Jim Whitmer, who is also in attendance here. Also, the board can make what they want to. We still have that letter from Will Bundy, which I'm happy to display or read. Will also, I suppose, if you're comfortable that you've summarized it as well, I'll just leave it on the public record and available at our website as it is right now.
Curtis, I think you should spare everyone.
Okay, it's a great letter. Perfect.
Send it around, and we can have to talk with anyone about it.
Great. Yeah.
Okay.
All right. So if there's no one else out there who's looking to speak to this, at this point we will close the public hearing, and we will have a discussion amongst the board.
If you close the hearing, then we can't continue it till next month.
You are right.
Yeah. The whole line of my screen here, me, Linda, and Jeff all raised our hand to say the same thing there.
You could just close public speak for tonight.
There we go. We will close public speak. There we go. I knew there was all these. Jamie, how many years have you been doing this with me? And I never get it right.
Keeps me on my toes.
There you go. So we will close the public speak time for this evening.
Hold on. I actually think Chris just tried to say something. Chris, were you trying to say something in public speak?
Yes, I would like to make a couple of remarks from what I've heard. I would just like the board to know that our focus is geared towards APA pool. In order to do that, we're required to have 9 pool tables in the event of tournaments. So while we are working to have the full 10, we can have no less than 9. I just wanted to make the board aware of that.
Okay.
Thank you.
So I think that, in light of where we are and how we've come this close, I think that for me to feel good, to be able to put forth a decision from, and feel good about the decision this board wants to make, I think we need to have what's going to happen with that. Yes, you say you're going to have 9 tables in order to be in the pool business, and that is what you've applied for the entertainment or amusement facilities under that clause. I think for me to feel good about making a decision, I want to see what's going to happen. And I need to know that, do I feel that I want to put my arm up and say yes, but I want to make sure that it's all going to be done.
I think we need more than a drawing. I think we must make it a condition of approval that there be a minimum of 9 pool tables. And that way, what Will said about taking out a table and putting in chairs, it becomes a zoning violation if he does that. He's applying for a pool hall.
And Linda, if you would like to make a motion and
Next month.
Okay. And I hope, Chris and Jeff, I hope you don't think that we're trying to drag this out or put anything down. I think you've done an amazing job of meeting the challenge of what you want to do, and understand that it's not going to be a quick decision. You knew it probably from the get-go. It wasn't going to be a quick decision. But you've done your due diligence. You've shown that you're willing to work within the rules and regulations that the city has, and that you're not asking for the moon anymore. You're willing to just to get to what you want. You know what you have to do, and so with that, can I say that if you come back with a plan that has 9 pool tables, and you can convince the zoning or the conservation commission that you're gonna that everything that meets their requirements, are there any other hoops that Curtis or Jamie you feel they have to jump through, or any other board member?
So I just want to raise the one issue that we discussed this evening and make sure that I know what direction the board is most comfortable with, because I want to respect the perspectives we've heard. Member Bush stated for the record, wouldn't feel comfortable disregarding the fact that the parking spaces aren't 20 feet in length.
But you said there was a see, my concern is we have to comply with the regulations. If you say we can waive it.
Right. So the stance that Jamie then brings up is that per the trip reduction plan, the applicant could conceivably reduce minimum parking standards, and instead of changing the number of spaces, change the size of the stalls. Is that something that the board would be interested in seeing the applicant do, or would the board be interested in seeing the applicant apply for a variance?
Well, I think that is the applicant's decision at this point, whether they want to make the commitment towards the requirements for the, reduction in the parking by 20%. They might not want to make that commitment.
So if I might, I just part of the original application, for the original project with a smaller number of parking spaces, included a statement about how we were, trying to achieve that trip reduction through a combination of all the, pieces that I explained before about the site location across from the bus stop, proximity to the bike path. All of those are pieces of, part of what was trying to reduce the need for, individuals to drive, personal vehicles to the site. So, essentially that is the trip reduction plan. So if the board doesn't agree that that's, I guess, sufficient enough to satisfy that requirement, we'd need to figure out something else, because I don't know as though we're going to be able to accommodate, feasibly, 20-foot long spaces on that site. So
So Curtis or Jamie, are there requirements for the plan, or there just needs to be a quote unquote plan?
No, there needs to be there are requirements for the trip reduction plan. It's spelled out in the ordinance, and it needs to be a formal submittal. It needs to be integrated into the plan for the building for, how what they're proposing adequately reduces the number of trips. And it's one thing to just say, we're across the street from a bus stop. It's another thing to, put in facilities that make, let's say bike commuting for your employees reasonable by having like locker rooms or changing areas or places where they could, put their gear or whatever. And so there has to be reasonable, if you're saying, well, we're going to put some bike racks out front, maybe the board says, yeah, sure, we'll like give you like a 2% reduction for the bike racks, but that's not going to that's not, 5 bike racks isn't going to really be utilized. So it's up to the board to make the decision as to the percentage that would be granted.
Okay. So if that's the case, all said and done, it makes more sense for the applicant to apply for a variance then.
Yes, maybe. The variance is going to, they have to, because the variance hasn't been applied for, so the public comment, they would need to submit a formal variance request to the board as well. And that would be, if they submit it, there is enough time to get the legal ads out and everything like that in time for the next meeting. If that variance request was received by, I think, next Wednesday.
Which is why I'm asking the question up front, just so that I can make sure that we're all
well. And so that's a business decision that Chris and Mr. Squire have to make. Is are they more? Do they feel they're better off to stay the course or to ask for a variance?
Well, I mean, I guess from my position and my recommendation would be, to try to avoid a variance request to the extent possible, just because of the legal ramifications. And if there's ability for the board to approve it under other circumstances, that's an easier venue, or easier path, just, based on my experience with, the legal requirements to satisfy a variance.
Correct. There are legal requirements for us to grant the variance.
Right.
But there's also, there are conditions that you have to look at in order to get a trip reduction requirement and meet the requirements of the trip reduction.
Right. No, and I completely understand. That's, I guess part of this discussion is just trying to garner the board's, tolerance for, where we would weigh in on some of these different decisions, because it does impact, the ability for Chris and others to move forward, because there's obviously financial commitments and other things that would need to happen, for a roll of the dice if we think that a variance is, a possible avenue. We need to get an attorney involved to draft that up, and if we're not reassured that that's going to be granted, it certainly has different ramifications. So that's part of the thought process, is that if there's a way to avoid that and put more control under your purview, I think that would be preferable.
I think that may be your better course, Jeff.
So in that case, just from a staff point of view, Jeff, the section you're going to look at that includes the standards is 10.524.
Okay, great.
All right. So in front of us, we have Mr. Whitler's letter. I don't know if you can make that bigger there, Curtis. It's tough for those old folks to see. There we go. So are we just going to leave it there to read?
And it's been up for the last little second as well. So up to you.
No, I've read the letter, so I don't need to read it again. So,
will there be any dining tables or booths in this facility?
Sorry,
No.
I didn't hear the question.
Will there be any dining tables or dining booths in this facility?
No dining tables. We will serve some bar snacks or food for the people playing pool, but that's it.
I guess my main I agree with Will, and I'm sorry, I can't see the name of the author of this letter, but I see the potential for there to be a lot, James. I see the potential for there to be a lot more people in the building than parking spaces, but I just also don't see how we as a board have a way to take a position on that. You know, if they meet the amusement requirement, even though we could see that there would be a lot more people in the building than parking spaces, doesn't seem like there's a way to, you know, deal with that other than just approving it based on what the plan says. It's an amusement facility, you know?
No,
That is the case exactly, Lindsay.
Yeah, that's not.
No.
Curtis did mention this earlier.
Yeah.
The parking standards that are in the ordinance are parking minimums. They are not maximum. And so if the board were to find that the parking requirements or the parking that's proposed meets the minimum standard but still not adequate for the use that's proposed, the board could require more parking. But I will point out that at the last meeting, the board told the applicant that they understood the applicant's position that it's really a pool hall and that the use of amusement facilities made sense and to go ahead and meet the minimums.
I think that the amusement makes sense to me, but I just see how if there's, let's say 9 pool tables, 2 people a table, that's 18 people. And if they don't count, you know, let's say each 18 people drives to this facility, that's 18 parking spaces taken. Let's say none of them are handicapped, you know, accessible people, then all the parking spaces are taken and there's no room for spectators or employees or anyone else to park. So I don't know, you know, that's my feeling, I guess, is that while I still think it's an amusement facility, I don't know if the parking minimum is adequate, I guess, at this point.
Can we ask the applicant to provide us with one more piece of information next month to talk to the fire marshal and the building commissioner for occupancy with 10 pool tables inside?
You are welcome to do that. My understanding, though, is that the architects provide that information to the building department, and that's what sets the building standards.
Yeah, the building use dictates the occupancy capacity by this based on square footage. It's a calculation of what's the use, what's your permitted occupancy per square foot, what's the square foot of your structure. That dictates what's your total occupancy.
But you can ask the applicant to provide
Sure.
anything.
I think that that would be useful because then we would know whether we're thinking about, you know, maximum occupancy of 50 people to 100 people. That's a difference I would think would be useful to know.
is there a request that Lindsay or Linda, is there a request that you'd want me to get from other city staff? Is there like a commentary?
No, I think the applicant should provide it. They obviously have to have an architect associated with this project.
Yeah.
That's who does it.
I didn't know if you wanted me to get them at the next meeting or something like that. But I get what you're asking, and my apologies.
Yeah, that's fine.
And if I could, I just like to point out that, this happens in every town, but there's often a discrepancy or difference between the occupancy of a building compared to the number of parking spaces required by zoning. So, for example, a restaurant may have the ability to, have 100 seats. That doesn't mean that zoning requires 100, parking spaces outside. So I just want to make sure that everybody, makes sure that or understands that whatever the occupancy is for the building based on exactly what John was explaining, the square footage and the use, that there isn't necessarily a direct correlation between, the number of parking spaces that are required, that, our goal with this project, or at least with the revision, is to provide the number of parking spaces that are required for that use, for that zoning district. So we're certainly happy to provide that information. I just want to make that.
I get that. I just keep thinking about how you have 9 tables and 18 people show up for the competition, and then there's only parking for those 18 people and no one else. And that's where, that's my concern.
Have you ever been to a pool league?
No.
No. Well, maybe you should. The only people that are going to be there are the people that are playing pool.
I don't know. I think about this place as if there's, I view it as something where people will go to hang out at night. You know, I could see people saying,
these are leagues. This is what these go. They go from place to place. They're a league. There's so many people in the league, and they go and play pool, and then they go to the next place. They'll be at what used to be Whiskers. I don't know what it's called now. There used to be one in Pulaski on Maple Street, and this is what they do, and he wants to be part of this program.
all right, but how much of the time that this place is open is devoted to leagues versus the public?
Oh, well, I don't think we have anything to say about that.
But that, to me, takes into account about
all these things up, and this is like, does this fit in our regulations? We can't control what happens, who comes in or after, what happens to the building after, you know. Does this work or it doesn't work? It looks to me like everything we've asked about before in the last plan that he showed us here. I think it works. I don't see any issues with it.
I guess I would like the applicant to speak then about the amount of time the facility will be used for leagues versus open to the public.
I don't think that's up to us. I don't think we have anything to say about that.
But to me, that impacts whether there's an adequate amount of parking spaces.
Well, that's what I'm saying. And whether it does or not, I don't know. I'd have to get my book out and read the regulations. Does it say that anywhere in there that we have control over that?
The only thing it says is we need to have the minimum amount of parking. We can require additional. But how, we've gone from, 15 spots, now we're up to 19 spots. I think we've come a long way.
Mm-hmm.
And has he met the requirement, the minimum requirement? Yes, +1. Does it mean that we are, at what point do you say enough is enough?
I think I would be able to say more if I knew more about the amount of time it would be league versus public. I think that sounds like a question that they could answer.
Okay.
I feel like I remember reading somewhere that they weren't going to have that many leagues. I could be wrong in recalling that.
Okay. Chris, are you still here? Can you answer that question?
I'm still here. I believe she's referring to tournaments and not league.
Oh, yeah. Sorry. Yeah, that's it. Yeah. Yep, tournaments.
No, we plan to have leagues at least 6 nights a week.
Okay. And what about open, like, does that mean that the public?
Oh, no, I mean, any open tables will be open to the public.
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
I mean, 6 nights a week for league sounds to me like a lot of league versus and less public opportunities.
Well,
yeah, I mean, on some nights you might, use 4 tables for league or 5 tables for league. That still leaves, 4 open tables for public.
Okay.
Tony, you said Whiskers used to have pool table leagues?
Mm-hmm.
How many tables did they have?
Oh, I'm not sure, but I know it's not 10.
2.
Actually, I know the ownership at the billiards hall in Holyoke that Chris was mentioning as one that he's Ivory Billiards. Do you want me to pull the numbers from that business or anything like that? Would any member of the board kind of want like a unbiased description of operations from that business?
I would rather hear from a neighbor of that business about the parking.
Okay, we're having a hard enough time meeting the requirements of the city of Easthampton. I don't know if I want to try to go into Holyoke now.
Yeah, no,
I have some friends there. Some people still remember my name. I still get calls from Holyoke businesses asking me to help them with their liquor license.
Okay, so are we getting anywhere, or are we kind of talking? At the end of the day, I think we need to know, what we feel the occupancy is going to be. So we need a plan from the applicant to be able to give us a clear vision of what the overall capacity of the building is. And as Jeff said, Yeah, the occupancy of the building does not necessarily dictate the parking, but at least it will give you an indication of what the maximum capacity of that building is. Yes?
Yeah, I think that would be helpful.
Okay. Is there any other things we would like the applicant to come back with? And then also if they're looking to use the trip reduction plan to be able to suffice the smaller than required length of parking spot?
Yeah. And the actual percentage of reduction that they're looking for in the parking requirement. I think that would be part of that.
Well, they're looking for less than 10%.
Okay.
So, okay, is there anything else that folks on the board would like the applicant to present?
And maybe they could come back with, on their busiest night, tournaments, playoffs, what have you, what do they feel would be their busiest or top capacity that they would have on a particular night or a week if they have a lot of tournaments going on?
Okay.
And I know there were some numbers and hours of operation and stuff that we provided initially, but we can certainly expand on that.
Okay. Okay. So now, I do see that, Jim, you've joined the meeting. We did present your letter, at least one of them. Is there anything you'd like to say? I'll give you an opportunity if you have something you'd like to add to what what you put in your letter.
Can everybody hear me okay?
Yeah.
No, I appreciate you letting me speak. I appreciate being able to attend the last two meetings. I think in those meetings and in my letter that in my correspondence to the board, I've made my thoughts pretty plainly spoken, so I don't want to flog them here and now. I think ultimately he's going to be very successful, and I think we're going to have a very crowded street. But let's hope that it doesn't turn out that way. But otherwise, I want to thank the board for their due consideration and for taking my letter, reading my letter, and for allowing me to speak. Thank you.
Absolutely. Thank you, Jim. Okay, so at this point, we're going to.
I'll make a motion to continue this hearing
Thank you.
to our February 24th meeting
That's
at
it.
6 o'clock.
Plan. All right. Roll call vote. Steve?
I agree, yes.
Lindsay?
Yes.
All right. Tony?
Yep.
Linda?
Yes.
And I agree as well. All right. So, Jeff and Chris, we thank you for your patience, your perseverance, and we will see you next month.
Great. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you.
Bye.
All right. And so let me bring back up my agenda. Oh, where was that? I had it here. Here's the agenda. Okay, so now we have John Lozito, seeking a special permit under section 12.7 and 8.5 of the Easthampton zoning ordinance to establish an accessory apartment at his single-family home at 63 Strong Street in the residential rural B zoning district. What can you say for yourself, sir?
Yeah, it's been quite a month. Okay, so I've delved in and had to do some really massive research on this because I started to think about, and I thank Curtis for really helping me out with all the different options that were available in helping me understand the zoning. So I've now, in the last couple weeks, I've got my architect involved again and the civil engineer to help me because of all the zoning laws and, being more familiar with them. But then I've also done some research with the city. I've spoken to the counselor in my zone, and I've spoken to the people on the EDIC committee who are working on new laws that are up and coming. And I guess I'm learning that the accessory apartment one is the first one that they're really looking to change. And they're actually coming to my house to talk to me about it because they want to understand what it's like for someone in my position to have to jump through these hoops to get these accessory apartment permits. And I've spoken with the mayor, and let's see, who else? A couple other people on the committees that are working on the similar things. Because my main issue with all of the options basically is that I don't really want to reduce the space size or build walls to subdivide the inside of the space, because it takes away from what the space has to offer and the way that I originally designed it. And then to speak to some of the concerns that were brought up last month, it was designed as a sound studio originally. And the reason that I haven't had any sound complaints in the last 22 years is because I'm a sound engineer and a sound designer and a musician. And I designed it in such a way that it's pretty soundproof. The stage area and the studio area are on a concrete slab. It has 2x6 construction that has blown-in insulation. It has double pane windows, and it also has curtains, sound dampening curtains behind the playing area. So unless the committee feels that there is, and this is an option that a few people from the city have discussed with me, unless there's a way that we can get the square footage to work by simply a jurisdiction. In other words, we're saying that this is the living space, this is the studio, and this is a common area or a storage area without building walls, then I'm going to probably either wait until the laws make it work, or I've already done a lot of research and work to subdivide my property, which is going to, if the laws don't change in a decent amount of time, then I'm going to have to buy additional property to subdivide my lots so that I don't have to change this building.
If you want opinions, if that's why you're here, I don't think any of that will work because you're in a residential zone. A sound studio is a commercial use. Accessory apartments are apartments for people to live in. And we've had 2 detached accessory apartments in the last 6 months. All kinds of neighbors came out in opposition. And because one was on Mutter Drive behind someone's house, it was 2 women, they were building a house for one of their mothers. The other was over a detached garage, I think on Kimberly Circle. And we convinced the neighbors that this is fine because it's a residential dwelling. You don't want a residential dwelling. You want a sound studio.
No, I don't.
That's what you have. And that's a commercial use. It's not an apartment.
Okay, a couple things.
And I shouldn't have said anything because we weren't going to discuss this much. But I think you're talking to the wrong people. I read the health department letter. You're in violation of the health code, the building code, the electrical code, the fire code, and zoning. Those are the people you have to deal with. Not your counselor and not the mayor.
Right,
You
but
built something that wasn't legal, and I think
yes,
you have
that's
no
true, and
concern
I understand that part
for
of
your
it.
neighbors.
But you just last said in the last meeting that you just had was that the inside walls don't concern you, because it sounds like you're looking at that there's guitars hanging on the walls, when in fact, really most of my stays are people who are families that are going to the UMass graduation and going to the UMass, or they're having a reunion because they all went to UMass together, or they're coming here because they're going to Six Flags.
But that's why your Verbo ad says events allowed. We don't allow events in residential zones. It's an apartment.
So,
Okay,
so
well,
let me.
That's okay. Then I can not have events, but I just don't want it to be made to be what it's not, because
Okay,
you don't
so,
like the
so
decorations.
let me look at it this way. Your statement that you started with was that you were looking to see if there was a way we could consider the space without adding walls, but make part of it this space and part of it that space. And now you're going back and saying, no, it's all residential. So in that statement alone, I feel you've contradicted yourself just a bit. And I think that here's the very simple thing. If you subdivide the property and it's a separate piece of property, you can rent it as a home. But I think, I don't know what the rules on rentals are on, whether you can own a property and lease it out on a daily, nightly basis by way of VRBO or Airbnb or whatever those sites may be. I don't know what the rules and regulations are, but as it stands currently, the structure that is there cannot be considered an accessory apartment because of its size versus the current main residence.
Yes.
And I thought we had a pretty good thought process how you thought we could go forward where you would live in the accessory building and rent out the main house. But I think that if you're pursuing that, here's a thought: you can withdraw without prejudice your application, and you can work with the EDIC, or you can work with your counselors and figure out what you want to do. But in the meantime, you will not be able to rent the property, whether it's on VRBO, Airbnb, or anything, because of the violations that are currently stated.
Yes, that's understood. Yes, I understood the option about changing the accessory apartment to this house, and that looked like a good option, but then the size still doesn't work, because even my house is 800 square feet.
Right.
And the barn is 1,200 square feet. My house would have to be 500 square feet.
Mm-hmm.
So then I would have to find a business use for my house and split my house in half or something to that effect. I did say that wrong, which you brought up in the last meeting, that I said that this was zoned residential commercial. That's not what I meant to say, of course. I realize that it's residential business. So
it's not residential business, it's residential. Period.
No, there's 5 businesses on my street.
But it doesn't matter. You are in a residential zone, period.
Oh, I thought that people can have home businesses in this district.
They can have a home business in a residential zone with very specific standards.
Okay, so, and then maybe you guys can tell me that if this also, so would they not allow a recording studio here?
I would say no, in my opinion.
Okay.
I'm looking at it as a resident of Easthampton, and yes, if we allow you to have what you have, everyone else on the board has the possibility of having the same thing next door to them, because if we allow you, we have to allow other people to do the exact same thing. And I sure as heck don't want to live next to your recording studio or an apartment you rent out and they have jam sessions,
Okay.
an
Do you
event.
remember?
And I don't think anybody in Easthampton should be subjected to that.
Okay. Do you remember who chimed in? My one neighbor that chimed in at the last
It doesn't
meeting?
matter what your neighbor, if we approve you, my neighbor could do that. And I don't think I want to live next door to that.
It's the Pandora's box that we let the genie out of the bottle, and all of a sudden, what's allowed in your area? Well, how come you let him do it and you won't let me do it? And this is why.
Because it didn't bother anybody for 22 years would be the answer.
Well, but
I played all weekend in my house this weekend.
well, and I can tell you that this is the reason for the Zoning Board of Appeals is to be able for you as a resident to come and say, look, these are the rules. I don't like the rules. What can I do? How can I how can I appeal the zoning? But we also cannot, under our purview, willy-nilly say, yeah, you can do it, but your next door neighbor, no, the guy across the street, we don't like him, so we can't let it. We're not going to let him do it. We have to have, that's why we have the rules and the regulations, and that's what we have to do. So, it really comes down to either, figuring out a way that you can somehow get that regulation changed, or I don't know what other option you have.
Okay, so I'm going to file for a continuance until I get more information about what's going to happen next. And if it's just going to take a little bit longer, because I'm just really getting into the nitty gritty of this information now.
Okay. And that is perfectly acceptable. Okay. All right. So we will continue your hearing until the February 27th meeting.
24th.
24th. Sorry. Yeah. I'm already on a February calendar where I know the next, 4 weeks from today is. So the 24th, and we will go from there.
Okay.
I make a move, we continue it to February 24th.
Yes. Second. All in favor, show of hands?
Aye.
Aye.
Good.
I'll record that roll call vote.
Thank you.
No problem.
Okay, thank you for your time, everybody.
Thank you. Okay. So we have 2 things on the agenda for next week or next month. Curtis, do you have anything, or Jamie, do you have anything in the pipeline?
Yes. Yeah, there's one thing coming, but I don't know if it'll be here by, it's a full month out. I'm going to say yes. On 410 Main Street, there is an application that began apparently in March 2020 to put in a veterinary hospital. It's right at the end of Wamelco Way.
There's already a veterinary hospital there. They're looking to, they wanted to build a new building and change their parking and stuff like that. They, COVID got in the way of them submitting an application. So they've been sort of working on the details for the last year.
Okay.
They're coming forward for a pre-application meeting in this upcoming week, and we'll have some dialogue at that point, and they may have a full application together by the end of February.
Okay. Well, so we won't see it in February. We might see it in March.
And by the end of February, I mean maybe by February 24th. It may be before the board at that point, maybe not. We shall see.
Okay. All right. Well, that sounds good. Well, we went over by a bit, but I think we gave everybody a chance to say what they wanted to say, and I appreciate everyone's patience.
Motion to adjourn.
Motion to adjourn. Second. All in favor? See you later, everybody.
Good work, everyone.
Thank you.